Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to another episode of the Niche Cast. This is our big old podcast later in the week, diving into some of the biggest yarns and ideas in Aotearoa sport. We are from the Niche Case, the Niche Dash Case, that is the home of our Aotearoa sporting content. Big yarns always to be found there. The wildcards recap and football. Ferns got a fresh flying Kiwis. I wrote about Christian Tuipulotu yesterday. There's Brad Riddell UFC preview, Genah Fabian PFL preview. I'll be doing Israel Adesanya tomorrow. Stephen Adams quotable edition is live as well. There's lovely Aotearoa sporting content on our website, theniche-case.com. And if you would like to support our content, best way to do so is via Patreon, patreon.com/our niche case, where it's just the best way to support us straight up the guts. And there's an extra cricketing podcast to be found every week there as well. So big it up to all the Patreon whānau holding it down for the niche case. And much of this is made possible because of the Patreon whānau. So if you would like to connect with the niche case and just be a hearty patron of the niche case, patreon.com/our niche case. Fantastic way to support our content and our mission to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence. And tomorrow's Friday, which is first of all, that's a decent little thing. Friday, can't go wrong with a Friday. Also, Friday evening after mahi, come home, check your emails. Well, there's only one reason to check your emails on a Friday evening, and that's the niche case email dispatch. You're not checking your emails for any work shit. You're checking it for the niche case content. All the niche case content gets put in that email, the podcast, the links to the website, all our content is there in the email, as well as extra yarns. So we just touch base with a few different Aotearoa sporting ideas, bits of news, current events, and we deliver that in our email banger every Monday and Friday evening via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Sign up, and then it's there twice a week. Extra niche case content as well as the niche case in an email form. So you don't need to be checking social media. You can just check your email. And another great thing to do is just check the website every day. Bookmark it, hold it down, pop in for extra yarns, because, you know, who wants to be scrolling on the socials? Fuck it. Just go direct to the webpage, to the email banger, and uplift yourself, raise your mana, get off social media. It's all good, baby, baby. Today, we're going to be talking football, Ferns. We're going to be talking Blackcaps. We're going to be talking UFC and PFL. City kickboxing is a better way to frame it. And a bit of rugby league, a bit of NRL. Not as good as international footy, but it's the NRL and it's back. So honkadori. But first, we need to step in with a dose of mindfulness wildcard. What do you got?
I've got a little ditty here from the poet Allen Ginsberg, who said, "None of us understand what we're doing, but we do beautiful things anyway."
It's a lovely warning for anyone who thinks they know what they're doing as well. Like if someone comes to you and they just know exactly what they're doing and they're telling you, oh yeah, I know this, I know that. Well, just how about none of us know anything, and we're still creating magic. We're still manifesting. We're still exuding mana and positive energy. So that actually shows like what we're capable of. If we've got no idea what the fuck we're doing and we're still doing it well, I mean, sure.
Yeah. Imagine if we figured it out. I don't think that will ever happen, but still, it's always nice to strive for things that are a little bit impossible. Because then, you know, you can't do exactly what you expected, which is kind of boring in the first place, because it's like getting to Ginsberg's point there, like the accidents and the things that happen by themselves are often like the best parts. That works creatively, and it just works in general. Like things that you never expected to happen in your life might end up being like amazing, life-changing moments. And I think also to his point there is life itself is poetry, right? Like life, just living it is creating an art form in itself. Because none of us understand what we're doing, and we do beautiful things anyway, right?
I was just thinking about a Oracle card in one of the packs I've got, and it's the Peacekeeper, and it just says
Nice.
"Let go of the need to be right." So I think that was
Yeah,
suitable to this
that's
mindfulness.
that's extremely good. Yeah, especially because it's called the Peacemaker.
Peacekeeper.
That Peacekeeper, yeah. Peacemaker is probably the person who tells someone else not to. Peacemaker is the one who reads that Oracle card to someone else. Yeah.
Are you saying I'm a
Peacekeeper. I like that.
peacemaker? Like, are you taking a
You are
shot
when
there?
you give that, when you dish out that information. I think that that is creating peace. If anyone listens and takes up the advice, then that's doing the job.
I just don't want to fall into the category of knowing what I'm doing. You know, I'm that guy knowing what I'm doing, talking about oracle cards, keeping it. You know, I'm the
Yeah.
peacemaker. I'm the guy who's right. No, I'm the peacekeeper, and I let go of the need to be right, and you just flow. You go with the flow. No idea what the fuck we're doing, but I do have a suspicion, Wildcard. I am following my intuition. I believe we're doing a podcast, and we're talking about Aotearoa sport. So we shall continue that flow where we've got the football Ferns first up on the hoist, and they played two games. They played against Norway, which was a loss, and then they played against Wales, which was a win. And with the football Ferns, we're dealing towards a World Cup, one of these monstrous World Cups touching down in Aotearoa over a short period of time for the Wahine Sports Department. And from like a non-football perspective, to me, that just sets up these games as preparation. So we're not too concerned with the results and stuff like that right now. We're just trying to build towards the World Cup, and I imagine that's what you're thinking. You're kind of processing these results with an eye on the World Cup. So just to frame our discussion here, I'm curious what you took away from those fixtures: a loss to Norway and a win for Wales with the World Cup in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. 2-0 loss to Norway, 0 draw with Wales. It's not ideal. I mean, Norway was a much better team. You sort of expect that, but they actually played quite well in both these games, I thought. Wales was a game that was winnable, and definitely the way they performed, like they were stronger over 90 minutes. It was pretty even first half, but the Ferns got more quality off of their bench, and they came closer in the second half to finding a winner. They were the team sort of pushing for it at the end there. So it's frustrating that they didn't find a goal and win that game. But I don't necessarily think that makes a difference to the course that they're heading on, to like the longer term journey, which is that 2023 World Cup right now. And they're about a year away from it. The draw is in October, I think. I think actually being staged in Auckland, which is nice. Because of course it's co-hosted, so that find out most of who they play, because a few of the teams won't have finished. Same reason how they did the draw for the Men's World Cup before the All Whites had played their intercontinental games. Is there's similar situations there with women's qualifying as well. But yeah, I mean, if they'd beaten Wales, it would have been a great little confidence boost, particularly after a decent performance, albeit it's still a loss against Norway, but expected loss, and they had some chances in there. But I don't know. Goal scoring has been a problem for them for a long time. Like, we know this. We know that they're not a team that has been able to score a lot of goals. And just looking at these two performances and seeing, you can see development there. Like Jeka Klimkova talked about how one of the things they've been working on in particular is trying to get the ball to the byline and putting crosses from there, like get behind the defense and then cross it back, rather than the deep crosses that are a bit easier to defend when the defender is just hitting the ball the way they're facing and that kind of thing. Particularly also because Hannah Wilkinson's probably the only one who's going to win too many of those headers as well. So they've got things they're striving for. They've clearly got things like patterns of play they're trying to develop and are working on. And Klimkova was really happy about, she said, I think there was a thing in one of the interviews that she did talking about how in the Norway game, which we lost 2-0, the Norway game, there were, I think, something like 6 crosses from those byline areas, which was as many as they'd done in the previous 7 games or something like that, some stat along those lines. So whatever they're working on, I mean, it didn't lead to goals, but whatever they're working on, they're getting better at. And I think the Wales game was quite promising it was quite promising in that I think they defended really well. A few little mishaps, which sort of came down to, I think, the fact they had four centre backs across the back four, like a centre back at right back and Michaela Moore, centre back at left back and at Liz Anton. There are a few little times where maybe they didn't quite have the positioning right, or just the situations you find yourself in against like a speedy runner running towards the byline themselves, kind of thing. It's a bit different to what you deal with as a centre back, where you're a little bit more step back and watching the play unfold before you have to get in there and intervene. So little things like that in the first half, but they tidied that up in the second half. They were pretty good. The only real chances Wales had in the second half were the ones of their own mistakes, where they just passing the ball out and stuff. And the midfield was very good as well. I thought Malia Steinmetz had a good game coming in for a start that she's very much deserved from her cameos off the bench recently. Annalie Longo starting again was really excellent. Like, hadn't played for about a year for the Football Ferns before this tour and is playing domestically at the moment. But like, I thought she was great. Good experience and the right kind of player who covers a lot of ground, keeps the ball moving, makes sure it doesn't like stop at anyone's feet, kind of thing. That was great. And the kind of game that Wales game was as well, where it was going to be kind of even possession. Like, it's not one of the games that we're used to seeing from them where they have to sit 9-10 players behind the ball and defend for a lot of it, which is so much better to be able to see them in that kind of context, actually playing an evenly matched game. It's like so many of the games that they play are against teams that are much better or much worse, and it just hasn't served them well. That's why they get up in these World Cup situations and Olympic situations and they can't get the results. It's like, well, they're not prepared to win. Like, you don't learn how to win a game by losing 5-0 to America every 6 months or whatever. It's not going to help you. Playing these games like Wales, even though we didn't win this one, even though it was a 0-0 draw, playing this kind of game is how you learn how to win. You see, like, well, where are the areas we could get better at or whatever. And they're going to be a number one seed as a co-host when the draw is done for the World Cup later in the year. That means they're not going to have to play one of the seven best teams at the World Cup. I assume it's 8 groups. Plus, the World Cup is being expanded from 24 teams to 32 teams. I might write a little bit about this idea I've had in the email, which means there's 8 more teams being added on. And not 8 teams from like the 8 more teams of the caliber of USA or Spain or England or Netherlands or whatever. There are 8 teams who wouldn't have otherwise qualified for the World Cup. And one of them is going to be in our group, One of those teams is going to be somewhere in that sort of like Wales realm on the rankings, sort of 30s to 40s range. That's a winnable game at a World Cup. The more of those types of games that we play, like that's the one they'll be targeting. The more of those kind of games that they play is how they're going to figure things out. So it was a frisky little tour in that a lot of players are in their off season. There was definitely some rust there from both teams because Wales are in exactly the same situation. And that didn't lead necessarily to the best execution always, particularly in the attacking third. Certainly didn't lead to the best results possible. But I don't feel like this. It doesn't speed up the trajectory getting towards the World Cup. Like they didn't advance anything further. But they also, I don't think, took a step back or anything like that. It's just sort of steady rolling towards what they're doing. It was just another one, even without a win. And it's easy to focus on the lack of goals. It's easy to focus on the fact they didn't beat Wales. It's probably more telling to focus on performance levels and intent and things like that, and just trust that, well, they've still got a year to figure out how they're going to start scoring goals and winning games. So that's where the impetus lies. No one cares if you beat Wales in a friendly here if you go and lose all 3 games co-hosting the World Cup in a year's time. Like that's the one that matters, and that's what they're building towards. That's when things need to peak. It felt like, from having watched both these games, it feels like they're still on a slow but steady trajectory towards that. And I like what they're building towards. I like what they're trying to do. It's just there's not going to be an easy fix.
So the White Ferns, they won a game against England prior to the World Cup, and then
that series against India,
the World Cup and shit the bed at the World Cup, and nothing matters about the.
Yeah,
like the White Ferns are good; they're winning games. And so, well, at the World Cup they couldn't do anything. So, are they that good? Is the coach that good, should I say. So it sounds like you didn't really learn anything about the football Ferns, but that's all good because it's just chop wood, carry water ahead of the World Cup, keep grinding,
exactly.
keep the building. But there was a range of players used. I don't think Abby Ursig was playing.
Nope.
And you had Ali Riley in your Flying Kiwis, so she wasn't playing, I imagine, either.
She was on the tour, but she didn't play the games. I think she had a minor injury or something.
So there were like a few different players used, and ahead of the World Cup, you probably want to give games to a wide variety of players within your core squad so that injuries and different things at a World Cup don't tear down your campaign. So just for individuals, were there any individuals that stood out? Like you mentioned Annalie Longo in your bit previously, but are there any like individuals who you thought really performed, really commanded further selection, further game time, or certified first 11 starters that got you a bit more excited about what they might be able to do moving forward?
Yeah, I think two in particular. Also mentioned that CJ Bott was injured for this tour, and who was the other one? Rhea Percival, of course, is out long term at the moment, so she wasn't there on the tour as well. So that's, and Annalie wasn't available. But Annalie, I think she's the best goalkeeper that we have. I think she's the most well-rounded goalkeeper. Vic Essend's form might mean, and Elite's lack of availability recently might mean that she's not first choice as it stands. Like she probably has to come back and earn that by virtue of having been away for a couple of tours. So fair enough, but at least for locked on starting players and Ursig, Riley, Bott, and that's three of your back four as well, missing right there. And also Rhea Percival. None of them played any part in this tour. So that's another thing to consider, that this was not exactly full strength footy Ferns.
But like the Blackcaps losing to England.
Yes
not
and
full
no.
strength. You can't take the results seriously because they're not full strength. Like that's how weird.
Maybe more the Blackcaps losing to Bangladesh fits in that basket than the England series. The England series, everyone was there. They got injured on the tour. That was the problem. But yeah, the two players to highlight, Vic Essen, I already mentioned, has been unreal every time she's played for the Football Ferns. This was one of her quietest games. She didn't really have. I'm struggling to think of a difficult save she had to make, which is a rarity because normally she comes in and makes 10 amazing saves. She has started 6 games for the Ferns in her career. This is the 8th cap, but the first 2 were both sort of like substitute cameo appearances, don't really count other than for the numbers. 6 starts, 3 clean sheets. Nobody else has kept a clean sheet in goal for the Football Ferns in the last 3 years. Vic Essen has 3. She started in what are we talking about here? There's obviously the 0-0 draw against Wales, there's the 0-0 draw against Czech Republic, and there was the 2-0 win against South Korea. So the 3 positive results that they've got under Jeka Kumplova, Vic Essen has been the starting goalkeeper. And she was the starting goalkeeper in that game against Australia where they were 1-0 up going into stoppage time and ended up losing 2-1. Like if they had a little more experience out on the field, if the stoppage time was a little bit shorter, if they'd just been able to handle those moments a little bit better, then she might have had a 4th clean sheet and a pretty famous victory against Australia if that had just been a little luckier. They got pummeled in that game. But I mean, the reason they were still in it going into stoppage time is because Vic Essen made about a dozen incredible saves. So she's been fantastic. She was very good against Norway again. As I say, quiet game against Wales, but quiet game with a clean sheet and a draw. So I think she's pretty well established herself clear of Erin Naylor now at this point. And 2 reasons why I would say that's not only in my thinking, but also in the coach's thinking. First is that this was the first time in Klimkova's reign, and I think this was her 5th tour. First time where she's used the same goalkeeper in most of the 4 of those tours have been 2-game tours. One was a 3-game tour. But this was the first time she's used the same goalkeeper in both all games of a tour. So there's a clue there, is that when that finally happened, it was Vic Essen who was picked. Second clue is that both these games, Norway and Wales, Rebecca Stott captained, but Rebecca Stott isn't quite 90 minutes of international football fitness right now for a couple of reasons. One, she's, coming back from cancer last year is one reason. Second reason is she's an A-League player, so she's at least three. Well, she is playing NPL, so it's not like she isn't getting regular footy, but it's not regular footy at the same intensity. Even like international stuff is a step up from A-League anyway, obviously, a couple steps up probably. But she hasn't even played an A-League game for 3 months because that season's over. So Rebecca Stott subbed off in both games. Who takes the captain's armband on both occasions? Vic Hesson. Vic Hesson, who has played 8 caps for the football Ferns. She is about sort of 30, 31. So she's a good experienced player, been playing professionally for at least 5 years in Europe. But relatively fresh to this team, and given the captaincy as the backup after the starting captain left. So that's another good sign of where she stands within the squad. So Vic Hesson is the first player and the main player to highlight. The other one I wouldn't mind giving some credit to is Claudia Bunch, who I think had a couple of very good games in these, playing at centre back. She is, she's won back-to-back A-League titles with Melbourne Victory. Probably based on the fact that she's playing NPL, I would guess that she's going to go play another A-League season with the Victory. She's probably ready to go to Europe and find a gig there, but it's sort of also timing matters on those and what clubs turn up at what point. You don't know how that's going to go, but she's been excellent for Melbourne Victory, and she missed the first 4 games of Kunkova's reign because Australian-based players and New Zealand-based players weren't available for travel border restriction type reasons. Once she became available, I think she played off the bench the first game she was available for. Since then, has started every game. That's not a coincidence. It's not one of those like fluky things. She's pretty much establishing herself ahead of relative veterans like Michaela Moore and Rebecca Stott. Like, she's getting more regular starts than them as centre back. I would dare say, like, if Abby Ursig is not available, Claudia Bunge is starting for the football Ferns, and that happens a lot outside of major tournaments. So that's quite an important thing to have. And she's just looked, she has a bit of the Ursig about her. She reads the game really well, very classy, good and decisive on the ball. Can clearances and whatever, positioning's very good. Leadership aspects are growing and growing. I could definitely see her being like a club captain at some point, probably captaining the football Ferns at some occasion down the line. And just always impressed by watching Claudia Bunge play. And she had another good tour as well. And that's very much like established now as always going to be in any football Ferns squad that's picked, and probably going to be starting in more of them than not.
Beauty. We'll get into some Blackcaps here, and we don't need to break down their whole series. I am just curious how you've been thinking about the Blackcaps a couple days removed, and if there's any one thought that has stuck with you to this point. For example, I have been observing much of the coverage, and I've observing what the Blackcaps have been doing. Obviously, that's the job, but also how people are reacting to some of the Blackcap stuff, and all of it just kind of feels like a pattern that's been around a long time with the spin bowling. So everyone's talking about Ajaz Patel, his non-selection, what happened there, breaking it down. Like, there's literally a yarn out there titled "Breaking Down the Non-Selection Ajaz Patel" and stuff like that's happening. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that the Blackcaps in New Zealand cricket have always fumbled the spin bag. Like, they haven't been able to manage spin bowling for my lifetime. Like, Daniel Vittoria was good. Yeah, like, that's kind of like having Kane Williamson, right? Like,
yeah, one of your best ever players. Of course, you're going to pick him.
Yeah, he's going to be all right. Who are the spinners behind Daniel Vittori? None of them were actually built up into a backup role. They were just kind of used, discarded, thrown away, brought back. Case in point, Genah Patel. And then you get into more recent times, and Genah Patel was fucked over. Whether it was by the apparently there's that yarn about the coach of England not being too fond of Genah Patel. Genah Patel was literally the best spinner in English county cricket, but he was never really given a decent crack by the Blackcaps. And when he was given a crack, he was like 50 years old, about to retire. And then you move along the timeline. You go to someone like Ish Sodhi. He wasn't developed at all. He was thrown into test spinning and then chewed up and spat out the other end, and now he's a white ball spinner. Mitchell Santner wasn't developed. He was just put there as an all-rounder. Yeah. Didn't appear to get better as a spin bowling all-rounder. He did improve as a cricketer. Like his fielding was fantastic at points, but he didn't command selection, so there's no development there. And then you get into more recent times again, like Will Somerville and Ajaz Patel have both been used in mysterious ways. You go to someone like Rachin Ravindra. He was given the same treatment. Yeah, we'll select you, and then we'll get you out of there. And the dude we replace you with is Michael Bracewell. And we'll select him, and then we're going to get him out of there. Like, throughout my whole lifetime, New Zealand cricket and the Blackcaps have never managed spinners correctly. They have never developed spinners over a decent period of time and given them the best chance of success. So whatever's happening with Ajaz Patel right now is not surprising. In fact, it's just part of a far bigger trend, and it's in alignment with how spinners are viewed by the Blackcaps, by New Zealand cricket, and I think just generally in Aotearoa. I don't think there's many club captains who know how to set fields to spinners, how to best use their spinners. And it's a very strange situation, because when you play cricket in Aotearoa, the Blackcaps are usually deploying a full-on seam attack. So again, it restricts the amount of development that spin bowlers can enjoy. And now we're in the situation where, like, we can say Ajaz Patel's the best spinner in New Zealand. Are we sure? Because when he played, like, he didn't do much in the domestic summer last season, wasn't given an opportunity by the Blackcaps, and then someone thinks he's not good enough right now. But that's not a prod at Ajaz Patel. That is more in summary of this very complex, niggly situation of Kiwi spinners, where no one seems to want to demand that top spot, nor are they given a chance to demand that top spot, right? Like, Ajaz Patel took 10 wickets in an innings and has bowled 2 overs since then. He has not been given a chance to demand the top spot. It's very weird. So that's what I'm thinking about. Like, and that falls into the other idea of, like, pinpointing one thing about this Blackcaps little patch of woes. You can't say that the non-selection of a spinner was the deciding factor when the top order's not scoring runs, right? Like, when injuries are also happening. It's a big pile of shit, but the wider spin situation's definitely stuck with me for a couple of days thinking about that. Maybe you want to touch on that. Maybe you want to raise a different idea.
Well, I haven't given too much thought at all to the end of that Blackcaps Test series. It was sort of like, once it was over, wipe the sweat off the brow, like, breathe out. What a merciful ending. I'm just glad it's done. It was a cursed series. Like, it was a cursed series in so many ways. It was one of those ones where it felt like the timing was setting it up for we're just going to go over and smoke them. But it turns out it was one of those things where actually we were looking at it backwards, or we were looking at the mirror image. Or turns out all the timing was setting up for us to go over and get smoked.
But tell us something different, Wildcat. We know it was cursed. We know it was terrible. Tell us something different.
Well, that's why I haven't thought about it too much. Like, I watched a bit yesterday. I was watching quite a bit of the first session of Australia versus Sri Lanka, and thinking, first of all, it was funny because it was the first time that Australia has played a test match since Warney passed away. And yet there was more Shane Warne, sort of, what do you call, I mean, they'll get to the home summer, and I'm sure there'll be big spectacles in honor of the great man, but there was more stuff in that first England versus New Zealand test match about Shane Warne than there was in this one. They did nice little presentation before. Russell Arnold did a speech. there was a billboard up at the stadium that said something like RIP legend or something, and they spelt the word legend wrong, which is funny. LEGAND. And Murley was there in attendance as well, which was nice, especially because of how him and Warney had this thing going, chasing wickets throughout their, especially the latter parts of their career. But I found it quite enjoyable watching Test cricket between two teams I don't support, because it was like, after the trauma of the last month, I don't have to worry about like that nagging feeling of we're going to lose a wicket any second here, or the opposite. This over's going to go for 15 and we're not going to take a wicket for another 3 hours, and this is going to be a 200 run plus partnership for the 7th or 8th wicket or whatever. Like, none of that worry. Just got to watch a little bit of cricket without having to freak out. It was cool. Steve Smith got run out later in the day, which was fun as well. Didn't see that live, but caught up with that afterwards. So on the whole, I think it's a nice cleansing thing to step away from what was just a Blackcaps tour where everything went wrong. But I do like this point you make about the spin stuff, because I think that's real interesting, because it's real, like, it's very easy afterwards to be like, they should have picked Ajaz Patel, and you can be disappointed or disagree with the fact that they didn't in the first place. I didn't like that selection from day one, like the morning of the first test. I didn't rate that. If you're going to pick Michael Bracewell and bat him at 7 or 8 or whatever it was, just pick Ajaz Patel, who's a miles better bowler. Who cares about the batting that low down? But especially when Bracewell didn't exactly, comport himself like a test match batsman. He came in, especially that second innings where he just came in and slogged a 6 and then got out slogging a couple balls later. It's like, they've picked you because of your batting, and you go out and bat like that. What is going on?
But they picked him because of his super smash batting.
And he batted like a super smash player, so I guess maybe that makes sense after all. I don't know, but you can be disappointed with them not picking Ajaz Patel. Anyone who is surprised, though, has not been paying attention. It's not the first test. It's not like this is the first test after Mumbai. He didn't play any of the other ones up until that Lord's test. He only got 2 overs in that one. What did you think, they were suddenly going to just fall in love with him just in that time? Like, of course not. He hasn't been playing before the Mumbai test. He wasn't getting a lot of games, which were the games he was able to consistently play whenever they were playing in the subcontinent. Well, that Mumbai test was in the subcontinent. Of course, he was going to play that one. He took a bunch of wickets, made everyone else look bad because no one else took any wickets in that first inning. It was also not a good, great for Ajaz Patel. Not a good reflection of the rest of the bowling lineup, because it's not like he took 10 for 70 like Anil Kumble did once upon a time. It was like 10 for 150 or something. He bowled plenty of overs to get there.
Wait, what is more surprising? That Ajaz Patel didn't play against Bangladesh at Bay Oval, or that Ajaz Patel bowled 2 overs in this whole series?
Because
I think the Bay Oval is more surprising.
In hindsight, it probably is, because of how Bangladesh won, and Bangladesh with a bunch of spinners won. In hindsight, I don't remember being surprised at the time. And I'm not surprised that he only bowled 2 overs. In fact, to be honest, before the series, I might have, if you given me Ajaz Patel over or under 2 overs for this series, I might have taken the under. I might have just expected him not to play at all, So I think it's zero surprise factor for either of them. I mean, like I say, you can argue with the decisions, but I don't think it's a surprise either way, because this is what has been going on. And you're right about, like, they haven't ever really been able to. Daniel Vittori doesn't count because he was the best batsman of any of these spinners, so he already fits the category they've been trying to fit everybody since into, and B, just long-term, well-established, great bowler. Ish Sodhi was picked way too early and then churned out way too early. Like, he hasn't played a test match for about 4 or 5 years. So effectively they were like, he's done with test cricket at age 26. Most players currently aren't even being picked until they're over, like, not even being considered until they're at least 27, 28, 29. Like, how old was Michael Bracewell? About 30, getting his test debut, If Ish Sodhi had never played test cricket, I wonder if he would be in more contention to play test cricket now. But because he's been through the cycle and back out again, I don't know if maybe they've been like, well, we've been there, done that. It's like, but if he if he was fresh on the scene right now at the age that he is, the bowler that he is, I wonder if that would be a different scenario, in which case, very interesting. I don't think they can fit another spinner into their things where they can barely get one into a team as it stands, but still. But yeah, Mitchell Santner kind of ruined this for everyone by being a subpar version of Daniel Vettori, who wasn't as good as of a wicket taker and not as good of a batsman, to where they seem to think everyone has to fit that kind of mold. And they got so used to Mitchell Santner being in there bowling 20 overs max per test and taking maybe one wicket, probably none, and Wagner, Bolt, Southey taking all the wickets between them. Got so used to doing that they've got out of the rhythm of even needing a spinner, which is fine when those guys are taking heaps of wickets, but only really Trent Bolt was doing the business on this tour, which was the issue when the front three weren't doing that, and Jamieson didn't play the third test and got injured midway through the second one. Your lack of alternative bowling options gets pretty well exposed, right? And that's where the lack of cultivating any kind of spin bowling identity really comes to the fore.
Yeah, and these spinners kind of fit into categories like Ajaz Patel, Will Somerville, Ish Sodhi. They're all spinners. In the same way that Tim Southey's a seamer, Trent Bolt's a seamer.
Yeah.
And then
not all rounders, but yeah.
And then you get into the Mitchell Santner, Rachin Ravindra, Michael Bracewell. They are all rounders, or try to be all rounders, or they're just batters who bowl spin.
They're picked as all rounders.
Yeah,
whether they perform as all rounders, they're picked as them.
Yeah, we're not splitting hairs here. Like they're just all rounders. But my point is that we went from Mitchell Santner to Rachin Ravindra to Michael Bracewell. And mad respect to Michael Bracewell. I really like Michael Bracewell as a cricketer. Like I've said it numerous times on the podcast. All summer I was talking about Michael Bracewell. But we've gone down 3 notches. We've gone from Santner to Ravindra to Michael Bracewell. And the results speak for themselves.
Well, my question is, when is it Glenn Phillips's turn?
Right now. Like, why not right now?
Maybe he's next.
One could argue that Glenn Phillips is a better batter than Michael Bracewell, Rachin Ravindra, and Mitchell Santner.
Yep.
And if that's the case, well, I'd say Glenn Phillips is the best fielder of the 3, and that's coming from a big Mitchell Santner fielding guy. Like, I love Santner's fielding. Glenn Phillips is a better fielder, and you only need to bowl a couple overs. So Glenn Phillips can bowl a couple overs. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, he's if we're going down that route of picking worse all-rounders, we must be at the point of selecting Glenn Phillips. Like,
yeah, increasingly worse bowlers who are increasingly better batsmen to bat at 8. So at the logical conclusion, you push that train far enough down the tracks, you come to Glenn Phillips, who's probably the worst bowler of that lot, and it's the best batsman of that lot. I mean, it's him or Mark Chapman. Maybe Todd Astor will make a comeback.
If we get Chapman in Test cricket before Phillips, then we know something's definitely wrong. But like, are we sure Glenn Phillips is the worst bowler of that group? I'm not sure about that.
Well, he might not be, to be fair.
I like a bit of Glenn Phillips bowling. So it's all, that's the spin situation. That's the spin situation. It's been like that for a long time. And the Blackcaps have actually been successful in spite of that. They won a World Test Championship with minimal spin bowling. So also, if we're now just chucking all this great importance in spin bowling, I don't think it's that important, because New Zealand cricket hasn't viewed it as that important over the years either. So that's just how it is. This is another funky weekend of mixed martial arts. The martial arts are being mixed, specifically in the City Kickboxing Blender. Can't overlook or forget about Carlos Ulberg. Fantastic win last weekend, back on his rise. I think he's light heavyweight in the UFC, which is, I think it's a weight division above Israel Adesanya. So shout out Carlos Ulberg. Fantastic victory, striking clinic. A lot of the CKB stuff was on display. Setting up his shots, taking account of what has happened, processing it, dealing with the feints, fakes and feints and twists and shimmies to land a crucial blow. So he had a good victory. And now we enter this weekend where we've got Genah Fabian fighting on PFL 6. Then that's on Saturday. Then on Sunday, we've got Israel Adesanya headlining UFC 276 with Brad Riddell fighting in the middle of that card. And of course, Alexander Volkanovski has been training at CKB. He's going for his third fight against Max Holloway. That's actually a fascinating situation because Volkanovski's won 2 fights against Max Holloway, but now they get a third fight. So those first 2 fights were so close that the third fight is still a possibility. That just type of stuff happens in combat sports. So I'll start with Genah Fabian, just talking about her against Larissa Pacheco. Genah Fabian and Pacheco are both strikers. Fabian can do the old CKB. Like it's all CKB recipe stuff, to be honest. Like dictating striking, controlling the fight from distance, picking your shots, breaking down your opponent, and adequate grappling defense. And I think that's going to be the recipe for Genah Fabian fighting Larissa Pacheco. Pacheco is quite powerful. She might have more power than Genah Fabian, but Genah Fabian's taller. She's got the better reach, and I think she's got the better array of tricks to work Pacheco over. And in the PFL, they are both kind of chasing Kayla Harrison, who is the champion for women's PFL. Genah Fabian lost to Harrison in the semi-final of the PFL last year, and then Pacheco lost in the final against Harrison in 2019. So that shows where they are at in the PFL, kind of chasing Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison is a bit more like the Khabib Nurmagomedov style of MMA champion, where you wrap them up, you take them down, and you beat the shit out of them. And that's what happened to Genah Fabian last year. So she needs a win here. Talked about on the variety show, she's got negative points, -1 point from her victory, but she missed weight. And that came because she was based in the USA. So again, a lot of people were whinging and moaning about Aotearoa's rules and regulations. Well, Genah Fabian was stuck in USA and didn't hear much out of her. She just kept grinding, kept taking up the opportunities, staying close to the PFL to be available. Also, Ray Sefo is the boss man of the PFL. And this is back to the Aotearoa combat sports lineage. Like, Ray Sefo was a pretty influential dude in the world of combat sports. And I believe he started training out at under Lolo Haimuli. I think it was Balmoral Liga, like way back in the day. And that's where all the city kickboxing stuff comes from as well. Like, that's their lineage in Aotearoa. So it's pretty impressive. But that is to say, Genah Fabian, she missed weight, and she won't be missing weight here because she's back at CKB, and they've got their nutritionists, their team, and all that stuff around them. So be an interesting fight. She needs a win to stay in contention. I think she can get the win, but if she gets a bit too eager to stand in front of Pacheco, then it could be a bit tricky because Pacheco does seem to have heavy hands. Brad Riddell's fighting Jalen Turner. And Brad Riddell's coming off a loss against Rafael Fiziev. Got a kick to the dome in that fight. And so I'm interested, like, Brad Riddell is a very, cerebral fighter. And he's got very well-rounded. So I'm just interested in how he bounces back against someone who has got 4 consecutive finishes, Jalen Turner, 2 of which are by TKO or KO, 2 of which are by submission. So Jalen Turner's got 4 consecutive finishes. Prior to Brad Riddell's loss, he had 4 or 5 consecutive wins by decision. So Brad Riddell hasn't won by finishing in the UFC. And it's an interesting stage for him because he's coming off the loss, doesn't have any finishes, but is a very good, entertaining fighter. Someone who has quickly established himself in the top 15 of the lightweight division. And now he's coming up against Jalen Turner, who has been fighting guys lower down and is on the rise. So just interested to see how Brad Riddell deals with that, because a win and he's just setting up shop among the best lightweights in the world, and then he'll obviously get a better matchup. A loss and things get a bit niggly for Riddell in that division. And you've got Israel Adesanya fighting Jared Cannonier. Adesanya, as always, the thing about Adesanya everyone needs to know is just how he scrambles the mind of his opponent. And I was thinking about this. The only dude who has been able to do what they want against Israel Adesanya was Yoel Romero. And all Yoel Romero did was put his hands up like this and just walk around. That's why that fight sucked. But everyone else, they can't do what they want to do because they're trying to process what Adesanya's doing. And all Adesanya's stuff is like complicating the mind of their opponents so they can't do what they want to do, so it kind of freezes them, and then Adesanya just picks them apart. Jared Cannonier's he's come down weight divisions, so he's got a lot of power, and he's also got a fantastic like kickboxing Muay Thai-ish style, which could be tricky for Adesanya because CKB fighters, Genah Fabian, Brad Riddell, Israel Adesanya, they will start the fight ripping into kicks. And then from there, you're putting the opponent on the back foot, you're hurting their leg, you're taking away their power, and you're setting up things later on. Jared Cannonier is also going to be landing heavy kicks, and he has the power with his strikes that could trouble Adesanya. Like Cannonier could legit knock Adesanya out if he lands. Adesanya isn't necessarily a power fighter. He's a precision dude. And I don't know if Adesanya can knock out Cannonier. So it is a fascinating round of matchups. Like Genah Fabian standing in the PFL, fascinating. Brad Riddell's career junction and the scrap against Jalen Turner, that's a fascinating matchup. And anytime Adesanya steps in the octagon, also fascinating. And that's all going down over the space of 2 days. PFL on Saturday, UFC on Sunday.
So has because Jared Cannonier, I remember watching him fight in the undercard, or just lower on the main card, however you want to define it, of Adesanya's win against Robert Whittaker most recently, and it was sort of, I can't remember who was fighting, but it was sort of pinned as like, these are the next two guys up, and that was obviously a rematch against Whittaker as well. So has Adesanya fought Cannonier before, or you said he's coming down a weight class, which sounds like probably not, because otherwise he's kind of been working his way through, like he's kind of beaten everyone in and around him in this division before, hasn't he? He's sort of like working his way through them again, like second time round, lap the field. But has he come up against Cannonier before?
Jared Cannonier, otherwise known as the Killer Gorilla.
There you go.
No, so Cannonier's been in this division for a while.
Right.
But he, like a few years ago, he dropped down weight divisions. I think he might have been a heavyweight at some point in his career. So he defeated Derek Brunson. Well, if you look at Cannonier's last three results, he lost to Whittaker. Then he defeated Kelvin Gastelum, defeated Derek Brunson. Israel Adesanya has defeated all those dudes. Right?
Yeah.
But he hasn't fought Cannonier before.
Right.
And Cannonier, his power mixed with his funky striking, that's a matchup for Adesanya that could be tricky. So Cannonier defeated Derek Brunson in the fight you were talking about, and that fight was interesting because everyone was talking about Derek Brunson and his wrestling ability possibly being a threat to Israel Adesanya. But he got knocked out by elbows. Adesanya actually really likes Cannonier. Like he said, Cannonier will fight for the title. And when you hear Cannonier talk, like easily likable dude, like fascinating guy himself. And that is evident in his striking as well, which is really interesting. So
in other words, like the complete logical ideal matchup for the division, like this is the fight that needed to happen and the fight that is going to happen.
Yeah, like as far as like an ideal opponent for Adesanya, you probably want a bit more wrestling just to throw that threat at Israel Adesanya. But again, all city kickboxing fighters, they can, because Brad Riddell's shown time and time again, he can get out of takedowns. He can get out all that stuff. And that's the CKB recipe. What is likely to happen is Cannonier won't be able to do what he wants to do, though. Because Adesanya is just going to be standing there, twisting, shimmy, fake, all this stuff. And there's so much stuff happening that it genuinely scrambles and freezes the opponent. So we can talk about Jared Cannonier's power and all that stuff. You can't do what you want to do against Israel Adesanya. And that's, I think...
Well, even the Yoel Romero fight that you mentioned, where like the one guy who did sort of avoid the mind scramblings, I mean, everyone complained about the quality of the fight afterwards, but who won? It wasn't Yoel Romero. You know, he might have been able to stick around, but he didn't exactly get a dub out of it.
Which shows you the ability of Adesanya.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're not prepared for a dude who's literally not going to do anything. Like, you're preparing for the assets, the skills, and the weapons. You're not preparing for the nothing.
Yeah, the blank slate.
So then mid-fight, you've got to try and adapt and change. And Adesanya, like, got a bit too close to Romero in one of those exchanges, and Romero landed one of his heavy shots. So then you see Israel Adesanya just move back, stay at range, and pick him apart as best as he could. But the point there is that he was able to process what was happening mid-fight and change his plan to what Romero was doing. So I can see wins for all three city kickboxing fighters. I am confident they will all win, but there's also, they are difficult matchups. Like Genah Fabian is fighting Larissa Pacheco, who is one of the best female fighters in that specific division. And we've talked about Riddell with Adesanya as well, and their opponents are all they're either coming off a lot of hot shit or they're ready to stamp their mark further on the division. And for Israel Adesanya and Brad Riddell, these are really important fights to just solidify themselves in their respective pockets of the UFC. Israel Adesanya as a global superstar, and Brad Riddell as one of the up-and-coming lightweights who could contend for a title at some point. Let's crack into some rugby league here to finish wildcard. We're coming off the international representative round of rugby league, and the thing that I'm thinking about is just how a lot of these players return to clubland in the NRL, and especially a lot of the young players, like dudes like Griffin Niami, who didn't play. I think Jordan Ricky was 18th man for the Kiwis, for example. What happens when they go back to clubland, especially Griffin Niami, because he's one of the most impressive Cowboys forwards to start the season, but no one thinks about him because it's all about Jason Tomalolo, Jordan McLean, Jeremiah Nanai has burst into Origin. Other guys like Helium Lukey, some of those characters, Ruben Cotter. No one's talking about Griffin Niami, but Griffin Niami is the beast through the middle. Like, he's big, he's rugged, rips in, and now he's got a taste of Aotearoa Kiwis camp. And I'm just curious how those type of dudes, even someone like Aaron Clark, who was called into Kiwis squad as a backup to Brandon Smith, how does he develop on the back of Aotearoa Kiwis footy, let alone how the best players return to NRL land? Because the thing about the Kiwis, Joey Manu, Joseph Tapine, Fisher Harris, Dylan Brown, Jerome Hughes, Isaiah Papali'i, Jesse Bromwich, all the Kiwis dudes were playing great footy in the NRL. Like, I literally covered the excellence of Joseph Tapine and Joey Manu against each other one week. And then it's no surprise that when they show up for Aotearoa Kiwis, they're the best players on the field. So just how some of those players return to footy. And then I also did write about Christian Tuipulotu because I seriously thought he was the best player for Tonga. And the only player who rivals Christian Tuipulotu for like representative footy in Aotearoa through New Zealand Rugby League is Jordan Ricky. Like, as far as making teams every year, under 16s, under 17s, whatever it is, winning awards. Tuipulotu was in the secondary schools tournament team back-to-back years. Like, those dudes dominated. And we saw it when Tuipulotu was signed by the Roosters. There was a big kerfuffle because the Roosters were taking him from the Warriors. And it was a big drama because obviously the Warriors losing a player is always going to be a drama. But then the Roosters lost Tuipulotu. So, like, it's weird how that works. And when you've got, like, the reason I highlight those high pedigree juniors is because usually they don't make it. Like, a lot of the dudes, when you look through those rep teams, aren't anywhere now, and that's all good. Like, that's the issue about covering younger age groups, is that it's a bit, rotten to say this player should be doing that or this player should be doing that when it's not their journey to go that route, and that's all good. But am I surprised Christian Tuipulotu is doing what he's doing right now? No, because he's a high pedigree New Zealand Rugby League junior. Same with Jordan Ricky. And I can see how that might antagonize people, because New Zealand Rugby League are doing all this development work for Tuipulotu to play for Tonga. And if you're a person who is angry, that's going to be an issue. But we're just trying to, like, have people happy and working together. And I think
peacekeepers.
Yeah, we're peacekeepers, so, like, it's all good. Like, there's no reason why New Zealand Rugby League and Tonga and these, like, organizations within Aotearoa can't work together. Like, what, New Zealand Rugby League just going to say, nah, you're Tongan or Samoan, you can't take part in this under 16 high performance camp,
which, like, most players don't end up playing for the full national team anyway, as you're saying.
Yeah, most of them don't even play NRL, so it's hard to, like, determine. Like, you can't be racist.
Yeah.
You just can't be racist.
You're eligible for another country. We're not going to pick you.
Yeah, but it's also, I can see how it's tricky, because all the New Zealand Rugby League development stuff, the end product is Tuipulotu playing for Tonga against Aotearoa. But I think it just shows the nature of Aotearoa's, like, mana. Like, it's just work together. And that's the other thing. It's like Tuipulotu represents Otahu. He represents St. Paul's College. He represents South Auckland. He represents his community. And that's in Aotearoa. Like, so it's all good. Like, he's not out there solely representing Tonga. And that's, I just found it an interesting situation that I had to highlight, because, like, I don't think Tuipulotu will play for Aotearoa. Straight up. I think he can keep playing for Tonga. And the thing about Tonga is a lot of these dudes are also representing Tonga not because they're representing two nations and that's an issue. No, Tonga just has the best junior footy stuff in Aotearoa. Like, Hakula Tonga are always hosting teams. They're always hosting tournaments. They do the most mahi at this level in Aotearoa. That's why Tongans want to play for Tonga, because there's actually work invested in them playing for Tonga. And Tuipulotu, along with many other Tongans, has represented Hakula Tonga at under 16s, under 18s, just because it's like a free weekend. He's free to play footy. It's not because he's representing Tonga and Aotearoa and that's a drama. No, these are just young kids who want to play sport. Like, who gives a fuck? So I can see how it is a bit niggly for haters, but to me, it just sums up the standing of rugby league in Aotearoa, where rugby league has grown to the point in Aotearoa where there's a surplus. Like, I don't think Tuipulotu should be selected ahead of Jordan Rapana or Ronaldo Mulitalo or Ken Mamalo. So there's a surplus of talent, and it's a multicultural environment. Everyone's got a different background, and everyone's welcome to do what they want to do without any hard feelings. Like, people shouldn't dislike Tuipulotu because he represented New Zealand under 16s and now he's representing Tonga. No, that doesn't make sense, you know?
Yeah, and on top of what you're saying about like the pathway is also probably worth mentioning. Like represent Tonga playing against the Kiwis in what was a Kiwis home game with a Tongan home crowd as well as or like the buzz behind that and the atmosphere that you get from that is also going to be a big driving factor too. Like just that connection with the culture and everything that was just straight up incredible. And I was watching that being like, in what other situation do you ever get a crowd like that at an Aotearoa sports game? Like of that size and of that atmosphere. It's like you don't get it in rugby union. At no point is there ever an All Blacks crowd that hypes up like that. I remember
Like,
the women's team walked out for the second half down 30-0, massive cheer from the Tongan crowd for their teams. Like they're getting thrashed, nothing but support. Like how could you not want to be a part of that? You know?
and all the rugby union folk think that it's just going to be copy and paste to rugby union. So then
Yeah.
you want the Tongan rugby union team to play more games in Aotearoa so they can get the same thing. It doesn't happen. Like, of course, Tongans love Tonga, so they're going to support the rugby union team, but you don't get a packed out stadium. You know, like if you had, of course, if the All Blacks are playing Tonga, you're going to have a packed out Eden Park in rugby union. But if you're putting Tonga up against like another nation in Aotearoa at Mount Smart, you don't get the same crowd as Tongan Rugby League at Mount Smart, which is an interesting wrinkle to all of this because rugby union people just see that environment and they're like, let's copy and paste that. All we need to do is get Tonga involved. Yeah, but there's not that culture in rugby union for whatever reason. Maybe because rugby union, the Polynesian nations aren't encouraged to be in that position. So the only thing stopping you from creating that environment is your sport. You know, like that seems like a pretty big issue because rugby union makes it as hard as possible for those nations to be successful. In rugby league, it's not perfect, but everyone can see that you want to make it as easy as possible for those nations to be successful. So, another game at Mount Smart Wildcard on Sunday, you got the Warriors
Yeah.
returning, and they are facing the Tigers. So, good thing that the Warriors are facing the Tigers at Mount Smart. And thankfully, Michael Maguire, like the ability of Michael Maguire to just like fucking rid himself of the Tigers and do a great job as Kiwis coach is really impressive. I like it. And I'm glad he's out of the Tigers, but it doesn't change the Kiwi-NRL aspect of the Tigers because you've got Stafford Toa. He's from Auckland. He was actually named in the extended squad for Tonga. And he, in 2019, he was called into Aotearoa Kiwis camp as a development player. And he's another highly decorated junior in Aotearoa. So, again, who cares? We just want as much talent from Aotearoa, abundance mindset. We're not trying to hold anyone back or hate on anyone for something as trivial as rugby league eligibility. Like, people still view Ronaldo Mulatalo as some sort of scumbag. Like, oh, just struggled to support Mulatalo for playing for the Kiwis. And that's weird. Tigers,
Especially since he wanted to play Origin and was told he wasn't eligible. Like, what's he supposed to do?
yeah.
Like, he's not actually eligible to play for the other ones, so of course he's going to play for the Kiwis or whatever.
And he was one of the hardiest Kiwis in that game.
He was so fantastic in that game.
Also, it seemed like he had just discovered the pukana as well. There was a lot of pukana. I like it. I really like it. And
I do like that, yeah.
Tigers, Stafford Toa, he's from Auckland. Kimamalo, he's from Auckland. Fa'amanu Brown, nice return for him back into NRL footy. He's from Christchurch and he is starting at hooker, which is good. Kaumatualangi, he is from Auckland. That's the 17. And they will be playing at Mount Smart against the Warriors team, who I think the occasion's going to be good, and I can see how people think that's going to translate into a victory, but it's the Warriors. And I can see how the Warriors will not win this game.
Counterpoint, though, is that it's the Tigers. It's pretty easy to see how the Tigers might not win a game of NRL as well. Maybe they'll both lose somehow.
Two clubs with interim coaches.
Yeah.
Two clubs that love a bit of Aotearoa. Two clubs that don't necessarily represent the strength of rugby league in Aotearoa. The Tigers definitely have issues, but they've also got, it's the same thing with the Warriors, and that's why they cancel each other out. There isn't, but you're hoping that there's a bit of a Mick Potter Bulldogs interim coach energy happening. I don't think that is happening, but maybe the Tigers might be able to rally behind Brett Kamali. I just don't know what to do with the Warriors. I don't know if they're going to play good, bad, who knows. We all know what the environment's going to be like. We all know what the energy is going to be like at Mount Smart. To say that is going to translate to a victory, you're assuming a lot of things that could make you look very foolish.
Yeah, assumptions in general with either of these two teams are probably best not made. I don't know. I think I could be confident in the assumption that a sellout Mount Smart crowd is not going to be happy if the referee gives a penalty against the Warriors or anything like that. I think that kind of thing. They wouldn't want to be the referee, but should be a good occasion on the whole. Like it's going to be a massive crowd, and it is going to be a bit of a like. It's not completely because they're obviously not back to stay. But having a home game after everything they've been through is definitely going to be like dropping off some psychic baggage, like just at least getting rid of some of that pressure, some of the weight they've been playing under. So I'm not going to guarantee it, but I would be relatively confident, or I am relatively confident the Warriors will at least serve up a good performance, and a good performance will probably be enough to win. Some of that interim Stacey Jones magic maybe in return. I don't know. But it's I don't know, because on the one hand, it doesn't really feel like this season's going to amount to much at this point. Like, if you sack the coach at this point, most teams don't go on and get miles better with interim coaches or coaches taking over mid-season or whatever. Big losing streak might have taken them out of contention for a finals spot, or even like hoping to get into a finals spot or anything like that. But then the flip side is that makes this occasion kind of like, in a funky way, like the homecoming kind of becomes the season's grand final in a way. So I certainly think they'll be up for it, and I'm just kind of excited to see how that goes, because I think it's actually going to be in a funny way. Warriors versus Tigers 2 weeks ago would have been about the worst game imaginable. Under these circumstances, suddenly there's a few things that make it quite watchable. So, I'm excited for that one.
I am interested just like some of the logistics, because the Warriors still have all their juniors over in Redcliffe. So they're going to stay in Redcliffe, where the Warriors NRL team, I assume, are going to be based out of Mount Smart, and then travel to Australia. I think they go a home game every second week. So then you base yourself at Mount Smart and then travel to Sydney or Australia. Whereas like all the juniors that I've been talking about, they're still with Redcliffe Dolphins. Like there's still we have to wait till next season to get a Warriors reserve grade team, a Warriors jersey flag team, or SG Ball. Whereas right now, all the Warriors are still aligned with Redcliffe Dolphins. So that could be, I don't know, maybe some of those juniors just come straight back to Aotearoa and get placed into different systems or whatever. And I suspect Redcliffe Dolphins, they're trying to squeeze their players into different teams as well. And as the season finishes. So that might be tricky. I'll just stay on top of that. I was just looking because I've got the Redcliffe under-21s team here, and the referees, one of the sideline officials, Jacob Funk. So I like that. I like Jacob
What
Funk.
a name.
Seems like a good chat. One game I do want to highlight in the NRL is the Cowboys-Broncos. Obviously, Cowboys, one of the hottest teams. Broncos are also quite good. And one of the Kiwis players, Te Maire Martin, didn't play for Aotearoa. In fact, this game, what do we got? Te Maire Martin, Jordan Ricky, Tesi Robati's outside the squad. Peta Hiku played for Aotearoa. So 3 players were in the Aotearoa Kiwis squad, but they didn't play. Te Maire Martin, Jordan Ricky, and Griffin Niami. And I think all of those dudes playing together in one game could be really interesting, going at each other. I really like watching those 2 teams as well. They're probably highly watchable. I don't know if they're quite on the Parramatta Eels level, but they're not too far away, especially like just how Te Maire Martin. So think about Joey Manu as fullback for Aotearoa. First of all, while playing fullback for the Roosters, you forget about James Tedesco, and then he's playing fullback for Aotearoa, and you forget about Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. That's a decent sign, that seems kind of good. But what those dudes do at fullback, and we saw this with Manu, was first receiver, run it straight, and then get out the back of shape and just run the ball. Joey Manu running a crossfield short ball, Fisher Harris burst through the line. What did Joey Manu have? 32 runs for 401 meters. Te Maire Martin's lucky if he gets over 60 meters at fullback. And it's a completely different playing style to what Joey Manu does. So then if you're thinking about Aotearoa Kiwis, who should play at fullback, it's not just like Te Maire Martin's good, Joey Manu's good. They're completely different. Like Joey Manu is, we're talking about the why and some of these like culture building and stuff like that. Like you can see just all those players were just going ridiculously bonkers with their mahi. And you can kind of see like every run Joey Manu's doing, he's gassed, he's fatigued, he's hurting, but he kind of like, you can see him generating the mana from Tokoroa to just take him forward for another run. And he everything was bonkers. That's very different to Te Maire Martin, who is a bit more subtle. He's more skillful, a bit light on his feet. He's not going to be getting at first receiver running into forwards as Joey Manu does. And that makes it intriguing for the Aotearoa Kiwis because they're 2 very different types of fullbacks. But now we swing back into NRL. Joey Manu's playing centre for the Roosters, funnily enough, and Te Maire Martin's playing fullback for the Broncos. And I would recommend people watch this game, Cowboys versus Broncos. When is it? Just let me figure that one out. It's the Saturday 7:30, 8-ish game.
So right at the same time as the All Blacks.
Perfect, exactly. Don't watch the All Blacks, watch Te Maire Martin. I think he played rugby at Hamilton Boys High School, maybe. Just watch Te Maire Martin, because I'm not saying he's going to dominate the game, but you're going to see a very different fullback performance to what we saw from Joey Manu. And the closer you watch Te Maire Martin, the more you realize about the subtlety and like him being an extra half as opposed to a ball running fullback, which is like Tedesco's the legend because he combines both. He's like Billy Slater and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck put together. Joey Manu is a bit more Tuivasa-Sheck. Like he hasn't developed the nuance to be able to like count numbers, throw a cutout ball, and set up tries in that way, because he doesn't do it every week. It's all good, but he's so good at rugby league that it doesn't really matter. Te Maire Martin is the other extreme of a ball player. He's a half playing fullback, and that's just a really interesting thing to watch and learn from.
Yeah, that is a kind of a funky dynamic there where you get the like just like what you're saying about the like tossing between them for a Kiwis team. It's not just who do you pick, because who you pick affects who else you pick and how well everyone else plays, because you're completely contrasting kind of styles. Yeah, that's it, all interesting yarns and make for great viewing to chuck that onto the study list and completely ignore the All Blacks. Sounds like a good Saturday night.
I was just thinking, so Tonga, Talatau Amone, to get some good pronunciation from the local. I think it was Glenn Lama might have been doing the.
Yeah, I heard some stuff on that because apparently in Australia on Fox, they had their own commentators. It was like Shane Flanagan just completely butchering every name possible. He was calling him Joseph Tapine. It's like, this isn't a rookie that you're talking about. This dude's been around long enough and is one of the best players in the game right now. Like, of everyone who you could be mispronouncing, it's not that hard either. But apparently, the Channel 9 took the Sky coverage, which had the Kiwi commentators who were doing a good job getting things right. You know,
still hearing a lot of Murray Tuolangi. Not sure who he is. But I was just thinking, so Amone, every kick he was doing, right, like, not the best kicker, so it's always going short. He's not like kicking long necessarily. Joey Manu catching that, he just runs straight.
Yeah.
If that's Tamaire Martin against the Tongan forward pack and Tongan chasing pack, you're probably looking at him to pass to Rapana or Molatalo. And that's the difference. Because if Tamaire Martin runs it straight, he's probably going to get carried back a few meters, bada bing, bada boom. But it's just two different ways of doing the fullback mahi. And that's the podcast. Good podcast, I thought. Little pat on the back. Good Aotearoa sporting yarns. Stay tuned for the email banger tomorrow. Any upcoming yarns you want to tease there, Wildcard?
I have been meaning for a couple of weeks to shrug off the bank's trauma of that All Whites game and actually watch the full replay and write about it in a bit more detail about what went on. So I might try to see if I can find the time this afternoon, but it's a little bit of a tricky one. So I'm sure at some point I'll get around to doing that.
You're welcome to do the same for the Blackcaps. So happily hand it.
Yeah, probably won't do that for the Blackcaps. Maybe some stay. I've got a couple basketball things I want to get around to as well, but that might be a next week thing.
Kawabunga, kia kaha, stay beautiful, raise your mana, Māori ora, chit